One Orson Welles is enough. Two would undoubtedly bring about the end of civilization. Richard Wright. There is in Orson Welles a curious mixture of barbarism, cunning childishness, and poetic genius. André Bazin.
Many people have tried to describe Orson Welles and the legend that surrounds him. Most of them fail. In this interview for Tempo, he chose to describe himself with an anecdote.
Paul, take one. And I was left with one lecture in Kansas City, in an enormous convention hall. Held about 50,000 people, and it was a stormy night. There must have been about 25 way in the back. And the people who booked the lecture were so embarrassed nobody came to introduce me. So I stood in the wings a long time. Finally, the stage hand said, "You better go out there, Bob." So I walked out on this enormous stage and looked into the darkness. And I said, "My name is Orson Welles, and I put on plays, and I write plays and act in them. I'm on the radio and paint, do a little magic, terrible silence." I said, "I'm only sorry that there are so many of me and so few of you."
George Orson Welles was born on May the 6th, 1915, in Kenosha, Wisconsin, in America. His father, Richard Head Welles, was an inventor and manufacturer and came from a rich Virginian family.
My picture of my future was pretty wild, I'm afraid. I was a spoiled child, and everybody, sound of applause ringing in my ears from morning to night, you know. Sure. That's how it was possible for me to, because I never meant to be an actor, I had any intention of it. When I became an actor just to live, when I was a kid, my father died and I had no money, and I wanted to be a painter, and it's a tired old story. But it was possible for me to present myself as a star to the people in the theater and to begin as a star because that's the way I'd thought of myself as a child, you know. No humility at all. That's come slowly through the years. Perhaps it isn't humility, it's just exhaustion.
Did they take it seriously?
Yes, and I began as a star, and I've been working my way down ever since.
As a young man, before going to college, Orson Welles traveled to Europe. His first stop was Ireland. Short of money, he went to the Gate Theatre in Dublin to look for work as an actor.
I had a scholarship for Harvard. My father died, and he'd been a very rich man. He died dead broke, as it turned out. When they opened up the boxes and looked, there wasn't anything there. And I had a couple of $100, enough to get on a cheap boat, and I went across to paint. I got a donkey and cart and traveled around, painted, slept under the cart at night, and finally came to Dublin when the weather got cold, and I needed money, so I went and presented myself as a famous star of the Theater Guild. And whether they believed me or not, they needed an actor, and particularly an actor who would work for £2.06. So I began as a star.
Did you audition at all?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I granted them a bit. We've been friends ever since.
But what was the objection to going to Harvard?
I just hated going to school. I had gone to very little, and I didn't want to go on. I don't know why.
I mean, was it that you really didn't feel they couldn't tell you anything?
Oh, I thought they could, just didn't want to go to school. I now regret it, but I'm sure if I were 15, 16, I'd be running away again. It's just, I don't know, just the idea of going to school. I never got over my childish notion that holidays are better than school time. A kind of refugee from up higher education.
Might you have made a living as a painter, do you think?
Oh, yes. I wasn't very good. I still paint.
But you sold some pictures, did you?
Years ago, under false names, just to see if I could do it, but I have no illusions. I wanted to be a painter very much. I know now that I'm not.
Already a musician and a painter, and now an established actor, Welles next went to Spain to become a bullfighter and to write.
See, when I finished in Ireland, I went to Spain and earned my living writing pulps. That's a kind of magazine that you don't know about. It's In fact, nobody young knows about it in America, but it used to be everybody's livelihood. It's what started. Chandler and Hammond, all those people wrote for the pulps, which were a special kind of magazine, of adventure stories, detective stories. You know, Black Mask was a pulp, so on. And I wrote for rather bad pulps. I had a fellow who flogged them for me. And it took me about 3 days a month to write a couple of pulp stories, which I got about $150. And with $150, you could live in Triana in those days like the king of Spain. And so I became a bullfighter at the start by paying for the bulls. You know, nobody invited me. I just did it, you know. I was never much good except for killing, but I've done a lot of it. And I had a lot of fun. I had no illusions about being any good. It was just something fun to do. But I've actually worn the suit of lights and been in there. And also in Mexico, in festejos for benefits and all that thing, as long as I could still had any risks and I've owned a half interest in a bull ranch, all this. So I've got 40 years of being interested in it in my life. But it isn't as romantic as Hemingway's, I think, really.
You don't see the thing as a symbol of man?
Well, I see all that, but I see all kinds of things as a symbol of man and men, and, you know, everything's full of symbols, but I don't mean that. I mean, it's, I'm fascinated by the animals themselves, and I like the life on bull ranches best of all. And I love bulls very much, which is very much like people who get hooked on horses or something. It's a special kind of thing. And therefore, it's not as romantic. Of course, it's you'd have to be partly romantic to be able to endure this awful thing at all, because it is indefensible. To all those viewers who will write in attacking me, let me say at the outset that I agree with you, but I'm an addict.
Back in America, Wells returned to the theatre both as an actor and director. Eventually, he established his own company, the Mercury Theatre, and then went into radio, taking the Mercury players with him. Among his many productions was the remarkable affair in October 1938, when he scared millions of American radio listeners with his adaptation of H.G. Wells's The War of the Worlds. He produced a regular radio show for 12 years. What kind of radio show was this? Weekly?
Plays. Dramatization of books, plays, originals. I had all kinds of people working for me. Arthur Miller was a writer for me for a while. And Carl Foreman never lets me forget that I fired him.
You fired him?
Yes.
What did he do?
What? No, I just didn't think his scripts were good enough. But I had very good people. We spent a lot of money on the scripts. And I've never enjoyed anything as much in my life as the radio shows. Just great fun.
In 1940, when still only 25, Wells wrote, directed, and played the title role in Citizen Kane, a film which has been voted by the industry as one of the finest motion pictures ever made. Not only was it Wells's first film, it was also the first time he'd ever been in a film studio. The company which made it possible was RKO.
When I went to RKO, I went with the best contract anybody ever had in terms of total control. Nobody in the studio was even allowed to go to rushes or see a rough cut. If you can imagine such a situation. And under those circumstances, I made my first picture and almost finished the second. When Ambassadors was almost done with the final editing and mixing, I was in the jungle shooting one of my South American films, which were really made half for the government. Nelson Rockefeller and Jock Whitney at that time were part of RKO, and they persuaded me to go as a public service to make these pictures. I wasn't on salary. For inter-American friendship, something, solidarity. While I was busy doing that, there was a sort of takeover. And the leadership of RKO changed. There came a new president, and they put on the stationer, the note paper that year, their slogan for all the book was showmanship instead of genius. Which may hark back to your first question. And I wasn't allowed on the lot. They gave my people 4 hours to get everything cleaned out of the offices. It was entirely that the new president and the new setup had to show that what the old boys were doing was terrible. And since I was the big fellow at RKO, I was the one that had to go and had to be made to look badly. Ambersons had to be made into a failure commercially by not showing it right. The South American films had to be written off as a tax loss and not finished and so on to show that the studio had been crazy and had this fellow Wells, and now they were going to be solid, sensible, family-type pictures were going to be made, you see. And if I sound bitter about it, it's only because it's cost me an awful lot of work. But it was a perfectly understandable thing for them to do. They weren't being particularly villainous. That's a normal way, you know, of things happening on any big takeover, governmental or studio or company. It's a classic story.
Wells next became a political correspondent for the New York Post. Later, he was asked by President Roosevelt to run for the Senate in his home state of Wisconsin.
And then they said you might win, because there's a very weak senator running now, a new fellow called McCarthy. And it's always been on my count. Imagine if I'd won and he never got in.
Did you ever meet him?
Oh, yes.
Did you come face to face with him?
Yeah, well, that's the way you meet people. In more conventional circles. No, seriously, he was quite a charmer, you know. Totally irresponsible, villainous man. Just as bad as anybody thought. He had great personal charm. It was part of his secret of his success, you know, is that there was a kind of irresponsible boy there that won over even his enemies in conversation. He couldn't see that he was doing any harm. You know, some terrible little child with fireworks that turn out to be atomic, you know. He's a very funny fellow.
Wells soon returned to pictures. In the last 20 years, he's appeared in over 40 films and directed 10. But the film industry has never made life easy for him. But you do seem to have had difficulties in your filmmaking career, anyway, which don't compare with other people's difficulties, or perhaps I'm wrong about
Yes, no, you're quite right. I've had a hell of a time.
Why is this?
Well, because I hope that the main reason is because the money people, to a great extent, are afraid of something they can't quite define, and they're not sure what it will be. I think that's the thing that scares the most about me. I'm supposed to take a long time shooting. In fact, I'm one of the fastest directors in the world. You ask any actor, ask any of the actors in this last picture I made how quickly I work on a scene and how much we do in a day. But that's a fixed legend that I'm a slow director. This isn't true.
But why should they be frightened? Because they have the evidence of what you've achieved in the past to support.
Yes. Mind you, they're a little less frightened now, strangely enough. Either that's because they figure I'm tiring and they can control me, or because pictures are becoming more adventurous, or a little of both. But I find now that the opportunities ahead of me are greater, much, than they were 5 years ago. And it was really bad.
You don't yourself feel that you are
One goes in and out of style, of course, all the time, too, you know.
Yes. You don't think that you're not capable of meeting these challenges? I mean, you don't feel played out or tired?
Oh, no.
Money has always been a problem for Wells. He has spent fortunes of his own and other people's making films. But it's always a source of mystery where these vast sums come from. But do you have a sort of list of people to go to?
Oh, no, I'd be happy to get my hands on one, though.
There's no international director.
No. No, and you don't just go to somebody with money. You put the package together, as we say, and then you run around with it. And then the trouble with somebody like myself, of course, is that there's always money for pictures, but that has been brought together by somebody who had an idea for a picture. He's got that, and comes to me and said, "You want to direct it?" But that isn't what I want to direct. I have my package. You see, so then the idea is to go and find all the different elements again, which includes sometimes you sell a picture by territory in advance. Sometimes you have a pickup from a world distribution. And on the guarantee of the pickup, you borrow money for it or whatever. In some cases, I made one picture, it better be nameless. The producers and money men of which came to see me where I was holidaying in the Austrian Alps. I took a taxi cab from Innsbruck, and when they got to my hotel, they had to borrow the cab fare. It wasn't because they'd forgot the money, it was they didn't have any money. That was the way the picture started.
They were going to finance the film.
And they did. That's the whole point of it. The picture cost $1,200,000. And they started without cab fare.
Orson Welles has not made a picture of his own in America, his native country, for some years, though he would dearly like to. But you can't be the sort of filmmaker he is unless you have absolute control over every aspect of production.
I've almost never made any money of my own on a picture. I earn my living as an actor in other pictures. My pictures make money, and in every case they've made money, but not for me. I've never been lucky enough to have a deal where I could participate in the profits to any extent. So it's virtually true that I've been contributing my services as a director most of my life. And making my life. For example, I made a picture about 6 years ago called Touch of Evil. And I'd been in Hollywood a year and a half and couldn't get a job as a director, but all the work I needed as an actor. And I was about to go back to the continent where I can rush around and make it possible, you know. But I was in America because I wanted to make pictures in America. I still do. I wish I could work in my own country. But they offered me a part of, and they had a terrible script they sent over, and they said, you play this crooked cop, and it's based on a paperback, and we think we can get Heston. I said, well, I'll read it. I don't know. He called up Heston. They said, we've got this script, and Welles doesn't like it, but maybe he can do something with the script. And Heston understood from that I was directing it. And he said on the phone, I'll be in anything that Orson Welles directs. So they hung up quickly, got back on the phone to me and said, will you direct the picture? I said, yes, but the price was that I wouldn't get any extra money. So I wrote a new script and directed it for free and took my actor's salary for being in. That was Touch of Evil. But they never would have offered it to me. It was the only way they could get Heston. And it was just a mistake of hearing it wrong on the phone.
What is the problem about working in America? Why can't you?
I don't know. They just, you must talk to them about it. Because I'd love to make pictures in America. And I constantly get offers to direct. Let me make that clear. But in force of other people's scripts and other people's projects and things that don't interest me. What I liked about Touch of Evil was that it was such a hopeless story, and everybody knew it, that I was free to go ahead and make my own picture. I only had 3 weeks to invent a new one, but at least I had that freedom. But the jobs I get offered, some of them very good from the point of view of the traditional director who takes on a job, aren't interesting to me. I'd rather, if I'm in that, doing that kind of thing, I'd rather act and take the money and run, you know. But the chance to make my films in America has been very hard, but I think it's getting easier. As I said, everything seems to be getting easier for me, and I think maybe for directors in general.
What is so particularly attractive about working in America? Why do you want to do this?
It's my country.
You have a strong nationalist feelings, have you?
No, not nationalist feeling. I don't think that's fair. I'm I am an American, and I think everybody's probably better on their home ground. You know, I've probably been away too long. I don't think of myself as an exile, and I don't suffer from it, and I am fairly cosmopolitan type. I've been living abroad all my life, but I do think that one should do part of one's work on one's own home ground or on one's own home subject. It's not nationalist at all.
Part of the Welles legend is that he's difficult and tough to to work with?
I'm very tough with the administrative side of a motion picture. I'm very tough on assistant directors, unit managers, production people like that. I make them suffer out of all relative grounds, take it all out on them because they're not in front of the camera. I don't have to handle it. And actors need to feel that the fellow who's being nice to them can be tough. So I regard these poor fellows as the official recipients of proofs of toughness, and they get it. But with actors, it's always fun and nothing else. I'm never, never tough with that.
This toughness is a deliberate policy?
Yes, deliberate policy.
Do you make technical demands, talking of the technical side, of a kind that are going to push things for, you know, are you going to ask people to do things they've never done before and perhaps can't do technically?
Well, I think I know enough about the film technique not to ask what can't be done.
Well, what can't be done often can be done, though it's never been done before.
Yes, well, I mean literally can't be done, yes. Because, of course, one must always push the instrument a little past its apparent capacities. You know.
Is this because you're trying to extend the way in which cinema works? Or?
Yes. I think for me, it's the way to approach it, always.
Always as an element of experiment, in fact?
Yes.
And what about cinema? You don't have much time to see theatre.
I have time, but I don't like to go to the films. I don't like to go and see good films much because, let me go back at the beginning and say, I think there are two kinds of writers, you know, the writer who reads everything that's being written in his time, and the writer who is careful not to read anything. And I'm the kind of movie maker who is careful not to see anything significant or good, because it interferes with my own vision of things. And I think there's too many films nowadays are made with reference to other films. Films are beginning to have their own kind of literary approach. And I don't want to make references. I don't want to be worried that somebody did it before. I have to keep my innocence as a movie maker, you know. I'm totally innocent. I don't know if I do something is new or whether somebody just did it last week.
Do you actually enjoy this business of adapting, of writing before you start the film?
Oh, yes. Oh, that's it's the big job in a film.
You once, in fact, said the writer is really the key figure, didn't you?
Yes, should be.
Should be.
Yes, but it's hard for him to be unless he's also the director, which limits a lot because there are many fine screenwriters who don't have the particular top sergeant qualifications needed to be a film director included in their range, and therefore they're cut off from being the kind of filmmakers we need, I think.
To what extent, though, do you normally consider the audience you're going for?
Not at all. Impossible to. Sounds arrogant. It isn't meant to be, and I don't think it is. It's because the public is so unimaginably large. Whenever I do a play, I think not only of the public, but of the specific public of that year in that town and what it will be like. That's part of what's good about the theater and part of what's bad, what limits it, even as it makes it wonderfully immediate and so on. But a film, you simply cannot think of the public because it's made up of people in Manila and in the mountain fastnesses of the Atlas and the Andes and in Indianapolis and in Manchester and in tin huts in the jungle. You simply cannot think of that audience or think what they like because they simply aren't an audience. It's just the whole population that you're making it for, of the globe, some percentage of which will drift into a hut or a movie palace and see what you did, which is what limits films to an extent, but also to a great extent frees you. Because but the people, the purely commercial people, the downright movie hacks who give them what they want, are not thinking of the public, they're thinking of the distributors. They know what the distributors want, but they're not any more thinking of the public than I am. They can't imagine that public any more than I can. They just know that the distributors say there's a market this year for tough, sexy spy movies. So give them what they want, but they're not really thinking of a public that likes them. They're thinking of bookers who will play them and then report that we did that much money. I think it's an important distinction. Just as television and radio people, I think, tend to think in America entirely of their sponsors, not of the public.
And there's always puts whatever they do behind the times, rather, doesn't it?
Yes. Ooh.
There's never
more, I should say.
Nowadays, Wells spends most of his time making films mainly in Spain, where he lives. Chimes at Midnight, his latest film, should be seen in Britain this winter. But his theatre work has diminished over the past 10 years.
Take one.
You said also once that the theatre is dying all the time.
Yes.
You still hold by this too?
Yes, I think it tends to die all the time.
But it never quite dies?
No.
What keeps it alive?
Actors. Because the audience isn't around saying we can't live without the theater. You just close up all the theaters and wait and see what happens. There won't be any protests in the street. Nobody will notice that it's gone. We only have theater because actors need a place to act in.
Apart from his film, radio, stage and journalistic work, Orson Welles has written 2 novels, a book on Shakespeare and several plays. He's been a musician, a painter, a magician, a cartoonist and a bullfighter. He's also been married 3 times and has a daughter by each marriage. Welles is now 50. Whatever one says about him, he's done a great deal in a short time. And one never knows what he's going to do next. Is it fair for me to describe you as a showman, principally?
Well, it might be fair. I'd be sorry if it were fair, but it might well be.
You'd be sorry because you'd
Yes.
rather be known as something else?
Not known as, I'd rather be something
You'd rather be
else.
something else. What one thing have you ever done that you'd like to be remembered by more than anything else?
I'm not interested in being remembered. I try to keep from wanting to be remembered because I think it's a form of vanity.
In other words, you'd rather prefer that your current work makes your mark than Citizen Kane or something like this? These things should
That
be
isn't
forgotten.
exactly what I mean. I was even going further. I was talking about posterity and all that. I think being interested in wanting to be remembered is like wanting to be popular. We can't help but have that instinct, but I think we should fight against it. An artist has a duty to whatever he's given to express, and the less he corrupts it with considerations of popularity or posterity, the purer his work must be. That's rather a different approach than the showmanship we've been talking about. It's what I may seem to be indeed what I may be, what I am, might be quite different than what I would like to be.
Orson Welles is a kind of giant with a childlike face, a tree filled with birds and shadows, a dog who has snapped his chains and lies in the flower beds, an active idler, a wise fool, isolation surrounded by humanity, a student who dozes in class, a strategist who pretends to be drunk when he wants to be left in peace. Jean Cocteau.